Right, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Ackerman Institute. This is our monthly parent webinar series. So happy that you can join us. If you have attended these before, welcome back. If you're attending an Ackerman event for the first time, welcome. I am so happy to introduce our presenter tonight, Edgar Galvis. Edgar will be presenting Protecting Your Child from Sexual Abuse. And just to let you know tonight that we will be recording this webinar. We record all of these every month so that we can put them online. And if you want to revisit them later, you can always have them. But just please know that you'll be completely anonymous throughout. So no worries with that. If you do have questions, you'll see at the bottom of your screen a Q&A box. So please do just use the Q&A box for any of your questions. We will have time at the end to get to questions as they arise. But for the most part, please sit back and enjoy our presenter tonight. Edgar is an LCSW, licensed clinical social worker. He is both English and Spanish speaking, with over a decade of experience helping New Yorkers reach their full potential in outpatient mental health, community, and instructional settings. His experience ranges from counseling couples, families, and children to training and developing other mental health practitioners in a trauma-informed, relational systemic approach to psychotherapy. Mr. Galvis received his master's in social work from Columbia University, and he's also a graduate of Ackerman Institute's clinical externship program. So I'm very happy to turn the floor over to Edgar. So happy that you can share your wisdom with us tonight.
Thank you, Helen, and good evening, everyone. Let me share my screen over here. Am I on?
That looks great.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so good evening, everyone, and thank you, Helen, for that introduction. Once again, my name is Edgar Galvis. I use he, his, and him pronouns, and I'm a family therapist here at Ackerman, specializing in working with families who have experienced traumatic events. Tonight, we will talk about a very important topic: how to keep your child safe from child sexual abuse. Before we get started, I just wanted to say that tonight's topic, while it's an important one, it's also a sensitive one that may bring many feelings and thoughts. I ask you to please do whatever you need to take care of yourself. If you need to take a break, please take a break. I will only focus on relevant information that you as a parent or caregiver need to know to protect your child from sexual abuse and leave out any graphic information or stories of abuse. So once again, please take care of yourself. If you need to take a break at any point during this presentation will be in our YouTube later on. You can always come back and see the parts you may have missed. So let's get started. We have a lot to cover this evening. Our learning objectives for tonight are four main things, four big major objectives is to educate yourself, right? To really learn what exactly constitute as child sexual abuse, the different types, including the grooming process. We will also learn proven prevention methods to keep your child safe from sexual abuse. And I will teach you ways to recognize signs that your child may be getting sexually abused. And lastly, equally or more importantly, is how to respond and stop the abuse from continuing, right? How to deal with disclosures and stop the abuse from continuing. So why is learning about child sexual abuse important? In addition to keeping your child safe. That's why maybe all of you are here tonight. Child sexual abuse, unfortunately, has become one of the most prevalent public health issues facing society today. It is estimated that 1 out of 10 children will be sexually abused before the age of 18, according to the Darkness to Light nonprofit organization. And that is only in the United States alone. If you yourself never had a personal experience with child sexual abuse or know of any survivors, you may have heard of it through the news, especially recently with the USA Gymnasts Organization and the Larry Nassar case, or even more recently, the R. Kelly trial recently here in New York City. That 1 out of 10 survivors of abuse roughly equal about 42 million adult survivors in the United States alone, which is about 13% of the US population. So as you can see, it's a big it's a big societal issue that we have. And out of those 42 million survivors, I just want to say that we believe the numbers is actually bigger than that, because these are only of those who actually come forth and disclose sexual abuse. We know, and we will get to the details later on, that a lot of survivors do not disclose for many reasons. But once again, we will talk about the multiple reasons why a lot of survivors don't come forth. How does it break down in terms of sex? Well, as you can see here, let me just get my laser here. 1 out of 4 girls experience child sexual abuse during their childhood, compared to 1 out of 13 boys. This is according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC. I want to take a moment, and I'm gonna try to do a lot of engaging here tonight. I'm gonna ask you to, in a moment, to please give your thoughts on the chat feature of the Zoom. I wanna make this as engaging as possible. I don't wanna just be the only one talking here tonight, but I wanna hear your thoughts as to why do you think this disparity happens? Why the disparity in the numbers, right? Why do you think boys are 1 in 13 boys versus 1 in 4 girls are sexually abused in the United States? Why? Any thoughts? Let me see what folks have been saying here. And once again, your answers are completely anonymous. We are recording, but your answers are completely anonymous. Sorry, I can't see my tabs here.
Edgar, do you want me to share some of the responses?
Can you please? That'll be helpful.
Sure. Yes. Okay, so you have a few people are noting that's possible that less boys come forward than reported.
Absolutely.
Perhaps they are more exposed. I think the numbers are higher for boys and more reported for girls. Girls are more vulnerable. The gender of the abuser, massively men. Yeah, some great responses here. Girls have been conditioned to be people pleasers.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, these are definitely spot on, Helen. There's multiple hypotheses as to the differences in sex. One is definitely, like some of you are mentioning, the differences in the way stereotypically boys are raised versus girls. Boys are tended to be raised in a more tough and taught to be strong and not show any signs of weakness or vulnerability. It's one hypothesis. Another hypothesis is it has to do with homophobia, and what we know is that men are typically the perpetrator of child sexual abuse, and there's maybe some homophobia or fear being seen as gay between it happens in boys that does not enable them to to disclose any sexual abuse. But good guesses. Thank you everyone for participating. Okay. So it's a little more context about child sexual abuse. Child sexual abuse does not discriminate, right? It happens in every neighborhood or community in America. It's prevalent across all neighborhoods, irrespective of race, education level, socioeconomic class, and religion. Child sexual abuse affects us all, right? It's one of the root causes of many of many of society's social and mental health issues today. What do I mean by social issues and mental health issues? Survivors have tend to have more social issues, including, which means delinquency and poor academic performances, and mental health issues such as depression and suicidal ideations and attempts. Fortunately, child sexual abuse is largely preventable through education and awareness. One study, according to the Child Molestation and Prevention Institute, has it as high as 95%. So 95% of child sexual abuse can be prevented largely through education and awareness, which is why I'm so glad that many of you are here tonight. So let's get right to it in terms of learning about what exactly is child sexual abuse. Now, many of you already may have an idea. So I wanted to start off, as I said, making this as engaging as possible, hearing what you think, what we already may know, what educated guesses are. So I'm going to do the first poll question of the night. This is something that actually we're trying also for the first time. So I'm hoping that I get it right. Helen, help me out. See if I'm launching the poll right now. And hopefully you are all able to see it in your screen. And please, yes. The question is, sorry, I don't think I said the question. Forceful physical touch needs to occur for it to be considered child sexual abuse. What do you all think? Forceful physical touch needs to occur in order for it to be considered child sexual abuse. And the answers are true, false, or not sure. Gonna give it about 5 more seconds, and then we're gonna end the poll and see what do you all think. Okay. Sharing the results. Okay, great. I'm not sure if you can see my screen, but the answer is false. You're absolutely right. 85% of you think that the answer is false, and that is correct. Forceful physical touch does not need to occur in order for it to be considered child sexual abuse. Okay, so let's continue. So what is child sexual abuse? Let's get right to the definition. So child sexual abuse is any sexual act with a child for the sexual gratification of another person. Notice that I say of another person, right? Typically, when we think of child sexual abuse, we think of between an adult and a child, and that is largely true. You know, child sexual abuse, large majority happens between an adult and a child for the adult's sexual gratification. However, it can also happen between two minors or two youth, right? Where one has, where there's a power differential, where one is actually older because of their age, size, cognitive ability, or physical ability. Child sexual abuse could be physical and non-physical. We'll get to examples of those two in a moment. Physical acts of child sexual abuse. These are just some examples of physical acts of child sexual abuse. Vaginal, anal penetration, kissing, and oral sex. Sexual touching of any part of a child's body, clothed or unclothed, right? Notice I say any part of a child's body, because people, once again, often think that in order for it to be child sexual abuse, it must be in a child's private part. That is not completely true based on the definition that we just learned, right? It could be any part of a child's body that is for the sexual gratification of that other person. And lastly, making a child touch someone else's body part or their own, even if just making a child touch their own body part, that also could constitute as child sexual abuse. The non-physical acts of child sexual abuse: exposing a child to pornography or flashing of private parts, also known as exhibitionism; taking videos or pictures of a child's private parts; having inappropriate conversations or sexual acts that are intended to arouse the perpetrator; and sexual solicitation through the internet. This last one here is a big one now that we are more connected, that children have access to the internet at an earlier age through multiple devices. In fact, researchers have shown that approximately 1 in 7 youth internet users have received unwanted sexual solicitations. 1 out of 7 internet users who are minors have received sexual solicitations. We'll definitely talk a little bit more about how to keep your child safe later on online, towards the end of the presentation. Another poll question. Let's see if I could do this once again. The question is, who is most likely to sexually abuse a child? A stranger or a well-known person to the family? Let me pull up the poll over here so that you all could vote. I think I've launched it and you should be able to see on your screens. So once again, who is most likely to sexually abuse a child? A stranger or a well-known person to the family? About 5 more seconds, giving everybody an opportunity to respond. Okay. Sharing the results. I don't know if you could see on the screen, but yes, 100% of you are correct. Who is most likely to sexually abuse a child? A well-known person to the family. Absolutely. I'm so glad to see that. People often think that, go to my next slide. People often think that strangers are most likely to sexually abuse a child. And I'm so glad that you are all have debunked that myth. It is a myth that a lot of people share back in the day, especially. As you can see here, according to the RAIN nonprofit organization, over 90% of child sexual abuse perpetrator is a well-known person to the family. Acquaintances make up 59%. And what do I mean by acquaintances? It could be coaches, it could be a babysitter, it could be a religious figure, a family friend, a neighbor, a tutor, a teacher, right? Anyone that is involved in a child's life that you as a parent caregiver may know. Family members share the next 34% of perpetrators, right? It could be anyone in the family, a parent, uncle, a cousin, a grandparent, right? And lastly, strangers equals just 70%. So I'm so glad that you guys got that question. You all got that question correct. So what is grooming? We're going to talk a little bit about grooming as well, which is another important dynamic. Grooming is the preparation cycle that a perpetrator uses to sexually abuse a child and not get caught. This is an important dynamic to know and understand, because the more you understand a perpetrator's tactic, the better you will be in recognizing and stopping a potential threat to your child. These are the dynamics of grooming. It begins with the selection process. The selection process is when a perpetrator is actively seeking for their victim, right? They really are looking for a child who is most vulnerable. And by most vulnerable, I mean a child who's insecure, who has low self-esteem, who is lonely, someone who's naive, right? Who lacks a lot of information, about sex, body parts, and sexual abuse. Someone who's an easy target, right? Someone who they have easy access to, is what perpetrators you typically seek out for in a child. I just want to note, as I'm saying each step of the grooming cycle, I want you to know that there's intervention in each of these steps, right? For example, here in the selection part, I just mentioned the type of child that a perpetrator seeks. If you, and we'll talk more about that later, if you arm your child with information about child sexual abuse and teach them about body parts and sex, you already are helping intervene. You're already intervening and helping prevent a potential sexual abuse act. And the engagement piece comes next, right? And the engagement piece, the perpetrator will try to find a way to build a bond with that child, and not only with that child, but also their parents, right? That they're trying to build the trust of both the child and the parent by gift giving, paying special attention to that child, spending more time with the child, offering money at times, and now, like I said, not only are they really are trying to build or gain the child's trust, but also the trust of the parents. So parents should really, and caregivers should really be apprehensive or cautious with adults that may want to spend excessive or frequent alone time with your child, right? Keep an eye on those who, people who are constantly giving gifts, especially outside of birthdays or holidays. Because that is gift giving is one of the ways that a perpetrator is used to engage and lower a child's and a caregiver's defenses to gain the trust. Gift giving is one of the techniques to also bind silence, and you want to really be wary of such tactics. Pushing boundaries is the next step in the grooming cycle. Here's when a perpetrator, once they have selected a child or they have then began their engagement process for both the child and the caregivers, and then they start to push boundaries. They push boundaries by seeing how far they can get by actually physically touch. So maybe they're beginning a back rub or a leg touch. They start to become physical. But not always just becoming physical, right? They may want try to push boundaries in non-physical ways through encouraging the youth to break rules, to break curfews, to spend more time together than what they originally have contracted with that parent. So here in pushing boundaries, but perpetrators are actively seeking to see how far they can go and with the trust that has already been built between the child and the parents. The next step is unfortunately the Sexual Abuse Act, right? And the Sexual Abuse Act could be a one-time act or it could be repetitive, but that's usually happens next. Once a perpetrator feels comfortable enough that they have pushed certain boundaries and they feel they have gained the child and parents' trust, sexual abuse usually comes next. Follow up with the concealment stage. In the concealment stage, after the assault or the abuse, the perpetrator will try to coerce the child in not telling about the sexual abuse. They will try to tell them to keep it a secret. They will threaten about if they were to tell someone, coerce them, force them to keep quiet, even at times confusing the child to not say anything to anyone else because they may try to brainwash them and let them think it's their fault. They're also a player in all this. Once again, there's intervention in every stage of this. We will go into details later on about how can you intervene and prevent your child from becoming a victim. And another important thing I want to say here is that in all of these steps, the perpetrator is constantly abusing their power, right? No matter who it is, they're constantly abusing the power of either the title that they have, their age and knowledge that they have over a younger child. So they're constantly pushing their boundaries and abusing their power as they have as typically the older individual in this dynamic. All right, so let's talk about how to keep your child safe. I think this is the main reason of why you're all here tonight, is really learning some concrete ways to keep your child safe from becoming a victim of child sexual abuse. But like I typically always do before each section, I want to see what do you all think? What do you know already about what are some good ways to keep a child safe? And I'm going to pull up my poll next. My next question on the poll. Okay, and that is the next question is the best way to protect the child from sexual abuse is by A, educating them about child sexual abuse prevention, B, becoming a helicopter parent. Those of you who don't know what a helicopter parent is, it's a parent who's constantly overly involved in the child's life, always constantly keeping an eye on them, not letting them be out of sight. And C, not letting them have sleepovers unless it's in your house. I'll give you a couple more seconds before I end the poll. Okay, so I'm sharing the results. I'm not sure if you can see my screen again, but I'll say the answer. The correct answer is A. Absolutely right. You all got it. I'm so glad to see that. It's educating them about child sexual abuse prevention. That is the #1 proven way to how to best keep your child safe from becoming a victim. So let's dive right into the techniques. So what can a parent and a caregiver do? The #1 thing is educating yourself. That is the #1 thing you could do. And that you already are, since you being here, you already are doing that, right? You're learning more about the facts about child sexual abuse. You're learning about what exactly is it, how often does it occur, who is most vulnerable, who does it, right? Being here, you're already taking a big step in that direction in terms of empowering and educating yourself, so you could then empower and educate your child, right? So the next step is teach your child about their private parts, boundaries, and sexual abuse. What exactly is sexual abuse, right? And we'll go more into the details of how to have this conversation with your children in the next slides. And lastly, take steps to increase safety in your child's environment, including the internet, right? Remember I mentioned the internet earlier. There are certain steps that you could do to increase the safety in your child's environment and decrease the odds of the child becoming a victim. More on that, I'll go in detail into each one later on. Okay, so what to teach a child? The best thing you can teach your child is that they have agency over their body, right? They have agency and control over their body. Their body belongs to them. Their body is their own special property, and they really have consent as to they have the right to say no at any time about being touched, right? That is the most crucial thing you teach your child to prevent children from being sexually abused, no matter who it is, right? No matter who it is and what part of the body, that's another thing, right? Once again, remember, it's not just the private parts that we have to really focus on, even though it's a great emphasis on that. It's any part in the body, they have the right to say no to being touched, no matter who it is. And it is never a child's fault if a adult tries to give them tries to sexually abuse them, right? Tries to ever attempt an abuse on them. It is never their fault. Because it's always the adult's responsibility to keep safe of a child. So it's that those are the three main things, right? Your body belongs to you. You always have the right to say no to being touched, regardless who it is and where it is. And it is never a child's fault. That's another thing that you really want to drive home to your children. Another thing that's really important for you to teach your child is anatomically correct names for the private parts, right? You really want to, as soon as your child start learning about their how to the age when a child can start learning name their eyes and ears and nose, that is also a great age to also start naming their penis, the vagina, and the breast. All right, it is perfectly okay to start also naming these body parts using proper names and doing it in a way that's very matter of fact, right? Without any shame or any giggles or any humor or making it sound like it's a dirty word. You really want to start naming these parts so they could also be able to name them for themselves in using proper terms. A good way to start help a child name what the private parts are is also I use the symbol an analogy of when a child goes to a beach or a pool, it typically wears a bathing suit, right? So anything that's covered underneath the bathing suit, that is considered a private part. It's an easy way for younger children to really distinguish what exactly is a private part or not. On top of also naming, like I said, using the anatomically correct language for the body parts. Trusting their feelings, right? That's a huge thing you could do to also help your child. You could start by, in order for them to start trusting their feelings, you have to really teach a child what their feelings, what the proper names also for their feelings, right? You want to stay away from using language such as good or bad about how does it something makes a child feel, or you really want to start using proper names such as feelings, right? Happy, sad, disgusting, worry, nervous, right? You really want to give accurate names to these feelings so that when the time comes, they can also start trusting those feelings. They're able to identify the correct terminology also for their feelings. I use, as a therapist, I use a feelings chart. You can find those online. You could Google feelings chart, and it's a great way for, especially for younger kids, start naming their language. They're naming their feelings, excuse me. The difference between safe and unsafe touches is another important thing you could teach your child, right? So unsafe touches typically are touches to the private parts, but they don't have to be, remember. And but what constitutes, what also makes an unsafe touch is how it makes them feel, right? How does that touch makes them feel? That's how you differentiate between a safe and an unsafe touch. That's why teaching your child correct feelings terminology and teaching them to trust their feelings is an important technique to also help identify the difference between a safe and an unsafe touch. And lastly, secrets, right? A word about secrets, you could definitely help your children learn the difference between a good secret and a bad secret. You know, what do I mean by that? A good secret is a secret that that makes you feel happy, excited, makes you feel like joy when, for example, a birthday present or a surprise birthday party. That's a secret that you could teach kids concrete with that, the difference between a good secret and a bad secret. A bad secret is obviously the opposite, a secret that makes you feel confused, scared, worried, nervous on the inside, right? You teach your children that they do not have to ever keep a bad secret, right? Secret does not make them feel good inside. And lastly, what to do if someone tries to give them an unsafe touch. So in addition to what I just said about trusting your feelings, you want to teach your child to um, try to say no to a perpetrator who's trying to give them an unsafe touch. You want to teach your child to try to walk away, right? If they're in a place they could safely try to run away, walk away, or seek an adult, or get away from the situation, teach them that too. And lastly, but probably even more important in all this, is to tell a trusted adult, all right? If someone tries to give them an unsafe touch, tell a trusted adult that this occurred, right? And it doesn't matter how long it's been since this attempt, to really trust their feelings and tell a trusted adult. And you can make a whole list of trusted adult in the children's life. I have a video to show you all about the NYSVCC. It's actually my previous employers. They created a children workshop on child sexual abuse prevention, and you could show this to your kids, especially the younger ones. And it's a easy way to also memorize help them memorize the last intervention I said about trusting their feelings, saying no, trying to walk away, and tell a trusted adult. You may also recognize someone in this video. And the link, by the way, before I forget, the link will be also in the reference towards the back of my PowerPoint slide.
Edgar, we're not getting video, or sorry, audio for the video playback.
You're not getting audio?
No.
Okay.
Not safe touch.
How about now?
And there's four
Yes,
things that
it's
we'd
good.
like to teach you today that you can do that are called the safety tools. So can you repeat after me? You ready?
Everybody wants speech.
Trust your feelings.
Trust your feelings.
Try to say no.
Try to say no.
Try to walk away.
Try to walk away.
And tell an adult.
Tell an adult.
Trust your feelings.
Trust your feelings.
Try to say no.
Try to say no.
Try to walk away.
Try to walk away.
And tell an adult.
Tell an adult.
All right. So good job, guys. We're going to have to use those 4 safety tools in the next puppet show that we're going to do. And this puppet show is going to be with Petunia. And Herbert is going to play Petunia's uncle. Okay? You ready? Watch closely.
Hi, Herbert.
Okay. I'll let you. I spare you my acting skills on puppetry. But yes, that is me on the video. And but yeah, like I said, the link will be in the reference page towards the end of the slides, and I think the slides will be sent to you all. But you can also Google the NYSPCC on YouTube, and it's a great video to show kids to also learn to enforce these 4 safety tools or techniques.
Hi, Petunia. What?
Okay. So how to have these conversations, right? I taught you what to have or what to say. Now I'm gonna try to teach you, give you some helpful tips on how to have these conversations, right? Most important thing is pace yourself. Be patient, right? It is okay to not get through an entire conversation all at once. It is okay to have bite-sized conversations. Remember, most kids need to hear information repeatedly in small doses for it to sink in. So take your time, be patient with yourself, with your child, and be persistent. Right? This is not a one and done conversation. This could be this definitely will be multiple conversations that you may need to have with your child. What if moments are another great way to have this conversation, or you could turn it into a game. What if moments where you could use hypothetical examples, but key is to have real examples, right? Given the information and knowledge you know about child sex abuse, use real samples, real scenarios, or hypothetical real scenarios that you could ask your child about, and try to elicit their answers in response. You could learn how they're thinking about just different scenarios. For example, you may give a scenario using a family member. You're saying, what if a family member tries to ask you to take a picture of your private parts? What would you say in those situations? Or what if a teacher one day tries to touch your breast? What would you do in that situation, right? So naming what you know now about perpetrators, what the typical perpetrator could look like, not necessarily using terms such as strangers. Choosing a time when you and your child feel safe and relaxed is another good way to have this conversation, right? You want to do it when you have sufficient time, and you're in a rush or feeling already anxious because of another reason. So maybe during bath time, or maybe when you have plenty of time, you're dressing your child, and you want to talk about prior parts there, or maybe going on a long car ride or on a walk with your child, using those moments to connect. During a TV show or a movie that features some type of relevant story, right? You may want to use that as an opportunity to reinforce some of these conversations. And it's also, I just want to say that it's okay, it's perfectly okay to also plan a conversation, right? Like you may want to forewarn your child and say, this Sunday I would like to have a conversation with you about child sexual abuse or about preventing child sexual abuse. Just giving a heads up in advance that you would like to have these conversations about how to keep them best safe, especially using this presentation as a jumping point. Now that I'm hopefully equipping you more with some concrete tools that you could use to have these conversations. Increasing the safety in your child's environment, right? You really want to try to eliminate or reduce one-on-one situations between your child and adults, or just when it's just one child and one adult, or one child and an older youth present, right? You really want to try to aim for group situations as much as possible, where your child's not just one-on-one left alone with someone. You also may want to try to make unexpected visits when your child is alone. If you can't avoid completely avoid, and I know you can't completely avoid that situation all the time, but let's say you leave your child with another adult or another older youth, even if it's a trusted family member, make an unexpected visit, right? Try to really keep them on their toes and make them feeling not predictable as to when you're going to show up during their time alone. Let's say if you agree to pick up your child up at 5 o'clock on Saturday after spending some time together, you may want to show up a couple minutes early or an hour or two early, just to see how things are going between your youth and that person when it's one-on-one. Like I said, one-on-one situations are unavoidable. So do your best to ensure that they are visible to others and can be easily interrupted, right? So the image that I have in my head is if your child has to stay after school, if the child stays after school for extra tutoring with someone one-on-one, make sure they leave the doors open. Make sure that the room that they are in have it's a glass or windows full of glass and windows that people can see through, or they are out in public, right? They're meeting with someone out in public, or visible to others, and where others could also easily interrupt. And lastly, talk to your child after the outing, right? So after this one-on-one situations, talk to your child how the outing went with this person, and look for any changes in behaviors and mood. See if you're able to get a sense for how things went based on knowing what they're telling you, but also their mood and behavior. As promised, a word about online safety. It's just like you're going to teach your child about child sexual abuse in real life with other people in real life. You also want to tell them a little about the dangers of being online, right? The internet is a great resource for wealth, a great resource for meeting and connecting to other folks, and it's also a place for adults to prey on kids, right? It's also a place for adults to take advantage of a kid's take advantage of kids, right? So you want to give them that heads up, that not everything not everyone who they talk online could be who they say they are. Set rules for when and how your child can interact with others online, and not just time limits, right? And oftentimes I hear parents talk about, I have a strict limit in terms of how often they could be on their tablet. However, you really want to also familiarize yourself with what they're using, right? What are they using on that tablet? What are the websites they're going to? What are the applications? What are the video games that they're playing? I grew up in also playing video games, but the video games of today have evolved into being much more social. So there's a lot more chats happening in the video games that parents often oversee, right? Or don't pay attention to. They're usually focused on the websites and applications that kids are going today, but also video games are a big way of interacting and socializing with strangers. A good way to familiarize yourself with these apps, and it could be daunting. There's so many applications and websites and video games. Is the website commonsensemedia.org. I'm gonna repeat it one more time. commonsensemedia.org. It's a great way to find out the content of these websites and video games. It's for parents to know what exactly are these websites are about, to make sure that they're age appropriate and pro-social, right? You really want to highlight that they're appropriate for your kids based on their age and developmental stage. You also want to inform your child to never give any personal identifying information or send any new pictures or videos to anyone, even if they think they know them, right? Once it's out there in the internet, as you all know, you can't get it back, right? You really want to teach that to your child, that once whatever personal identifying information or pictures or videos of themselves is out there in the virtual space, you can't, there's no, it's very hard to get it back. Lastly, you really want to try to empower your child, right? Just like you're empowering them in the real world, you also want to empower them for themselves to look out for certain red flags. What do I mean by red flags, right? You want to tell them about keep an eye out for friends that ask to keep a relationship a secret. You want to give them the heads up to look for friends who asking for a lot of personal information about them, who are asking a lot of personal information about them, making promises to give gifts, favor, money, virtual money online, especially through video games, right? People who ask them for them to take for pictures of them or videos of them, and people who insist on meeting face to face, right? These are all red flags that you should really try to empower your kids and tell them about, so they also become aware of these red flags and situations to look out for. And then you could also use the what if situation game that I told you about, the what if scenarios about for what you get a sense of how they may react to a certain situation online as well. One thing I forgot to say is it's important to also teach your child how to block people online, right? Different websites have different ways of blocking people, unsolicited people's messages and communicating with them, make them feel not safe or scared. Teach them how to block people from them, and more importantly, to also come to you, right? You really want to have your child also communicate with each other. No matter what, they can always come to you with any come to you for any scenario that may happen online that makes them feel unsafe, scared, confused, nervous, right? Any type of interactions with anyone online, they can always come to you or another trusted adult. What are the signs of child sexual abuse? Let's do our last poll question of the night. So the question is, if a child is sexually abused, parents are more likely to find out due to which type of signs? Physical signs or non-physical signs? What do you all think? Okay, I'm gonna stop it right there. Great. The majority of you think is through non-physical signs. Absolutely. I don't know if you see the results, but I am sharing them now. But yes, 97% of you think that it's due to non-physical signs, and that is absolutely correct. Let's dive a little bit more into the different signs of a child who may be getting sexually abused, right? Let's start with the non-physical first. Emotional behavioral signs. You may notice changes in behaviors such as eating or sleeping problems, right? They may have problems falling asleep or afraid to sleep on themselves. They may experience a lot of nightmares while they're sleeping. Yeah, child may withdraw or isolate themselves, or maybe lose interest in things that they used to enjoy, they used to like doing. They may experience a lot of more frequent temper tantrums or aggressive behaviors towards families and friends. Regressive behaviors is another one that I have seen, where a child um, starts to act or do certain behaviors that's not appropriate to their chronological age. So they may resort back to thumb sucking or wetting the bed. A child may also experience a lot of separation anxiety or not wanting to be left alone. Or they may also fear someone, right? They may not used to be afraid of all of a sudden, inexplicably. Um, early or developmentally inappropriate sexual behavior or knowledge is another sign or a red flag of somebody maybe getting sexually abused. And then reenactment through play, right? I see a lot of young kids try to reenact the sexual abuse through play, or doing the same behaviors that was done to them to others. Unfortunately, can also happen as well. Other signs of emotional and behavioral signs or non-physical signs include fluctuating moods, right? The child may have fluctuating moods, increased level of anxiety or nervousness, sadness or depression. So usually a happy child may become withdrawn or clingy, and will get easily irritable, right? Get frustrated and irritated easily. But one thing is important to know here, that even though that the non-physical signs are easier to identify, right, easier to identify versus the physical signs, so be aware that in some children there are no signs whatsoever that they may be getting sexually abused, right, whether it's physical, emotional, or behavior. So the physical signs now, there may be some pain, swelling, or itching of the genitals, urinary tract infections or STIs, excessive masturbation, difficulty walking or sitting, redness or rashes around the genital area, and chronic stomach pain or headaches. You may think, why chronic stomach pains or headache? That's usually because of the anxiety or the nervousness or the load of feeling of guilt or that they may carry, especially in the stomach area and headache, that they start to experience these physical symptoms, not necessarily because of the sexual, not necessarily because of the physical or the sexual abuse, but because of the the symptoms, right? That kids could experience, the non-physical symptoms that the kids could experience. They may start to have these stomach pains or headaches. Just a quick word on sexually appropriate behavior. Sexually playful behaviors is part of normal and healthy development in kids. Children are naturally curious and about everything, including their bodies, other people's bodies, about sex. It's usually just an expression of curiosity. How to distinguish between something that's normal or not normal in kids? Normal sexual exploration is infrequent, spontaneous, it's voluntary, it's playful, it's curiosity driven, like I mentioned. It usually happens to children of the same age, right? So 2 7-year-olds who are playing doctors together, checking out each other's body parts, it could be a typical sexually exploratory activity. What should be concerning? Differences in power dynamics, something that's not voluntary, or something that's clearly beyond a child's developmental age. So 2 examples of concerning behaviors: when a 13-year-old, for example, coercing a 7-year-old to play doctor, right? That's a big developmental or a big age gap right there. Another concerning event is when maybe a 5-year-old, playing with their dolls, and doing some type of sexual acts with their doll, right? So there could be those would be definitely some red flags of something clearly beyond a child's developmental stage. The National Child Traumatic Stress Network has some some guidance for you all in terms of what could be appropriate for a child age, given given their age. I will put a link also on this on my reference, and you should be able to get this also when you send out an email. All right, so to wrap up, and I think this is, like I said, equally or even more important about preventing, is also how to respond to a disclosure and stop the abuse from reoccurring. So let's say you try your best to educate yourself to prevent, try to recognize the symptoms, the signs. Remember, there's still a small chance that, unfortunately, even though it's been greatly minimized, still a small chance, unfortunately, that a child may experience child sexual abuse. Remember, it's up to 95%, but it's still not 100%. And like I said, also how some kids don't even show any signs or symptoms of it being sexually abused. So to really understand, why is it hard for survivors to disclose sexual abuse, really understand, we really don't have to know there's different barriers for a survivor to disclose, right? There's the internal barrier, there's the relational barrier, and also the systemic barriers that makes it really hard for a child to disclose sexual abuse. And I want you to also know that disclosure is a process, right? It's not an event, right? So it's not just a one and done. It's an internal process that kids, survivors need to go through, right? From internally, pushing past any feelings of self-blame and guilt, confusion. I love this and trust this person. Is what they did right or wrong? But it feels good in my body, but I feel yucky on the inside. A lot of shame, also involved with the sexual abuse, worried that they won't be believed. So fears of what could happen if it were to disclose, right? Fear of the perpetrator maybe doing something to them, or for doing damage to them or someone they love. Worry about the repercussions to that perpetrator. Sometimes kids love their perpetrator. They just don't, no one, they wanted the abuse to stop, right? They're not welcome to abuse. So they still worry about what could happen if they were to disclose to authorities about, or to a trusted adult about the sexual abuse act. Feeling like feeling like having a trusted person to tell. This is one that I recently heard somebody say, I felt like I had no one to tell that I was being abused. And that also makes it really hard for people to disclose. To cultural norms and values, a lot of cultures believe in respecting your elders and not questioning them, and respecting authority figures, and following those norms. To a lot of perpetrators having power and admiration in the community, right? I think about the Sandusky case in Penn State a couple of years ago, where this guy had a lot of influence in the community and admiration at the university. So all of these barriers makes it really hard for disclosure to occur. Just to wrap up, this is the last slide, and I'll take your questions after this. How to react, right? So the number one thing you could do, if you ever find yourself in a situation, is really try the hardest to stay calm, to pay attention to it, not only in your words, but also your body language and how you're reacting to that child. Support, believe, and listen, right? You really want to do your best to support, believe, and listen to that young person, and validate, and empathize, and really just try to listen. If you must ask questions, try to ask open-ended questions, right? You don't want to be asking a lot of close-ended or lead-on questions, right? Really do your best asking open-ended questions. But remember, you're just there to validate, to support, to believe. Leave the investigation to the authorities, leave the investigations to experts who really try to unearth what exactly has been going on. Make sure you express your gratitude, and try your hardest to appropriately reassure them. What I mean by reassuring, right? Thank you for telling me. I will do my best to act on this information, but do not reassure or make unhelpful promises, such as, you will never see that person again, right? Because that may not always be true. That the person may not see the perpetrator ever again. So really try to express gratitude and give appropriate reassurance. Importantly, also equally important is to report the abuse to authorities, right? In New York City, a simple way to do is just calling 311 and saying you want to report a case of abuse to authorities. If it's a non-emergency situation, of course, if it's an emergency situation, you want to call 911 or call the police. And seek out therapeutic help for you and your child, right? Oftentimes people just seek out therapeutic help for the child, but they forget about themselves too. So, or the family members who are also impacted by the trauma. And lastly, I'll leave you with this. Your response, I want you to know this, your response is actually the first step in ending the abuse and the beginning of the healing process. So with that being said, I want to thank you all for listening the presentation. I'm going to leave it out to Helen and see if there's any questions.
Thank you, everyone. If you can stick around, we will just have time for a couple questions tonight. So Edgar, there are two questions that are related. And this is really about how parents and caregivers can help their kids learn and get educated about sexual abuse. The first one is how to start this conversation with a high school teenage male, especially at an age where they feel like they may know everything already, or the conversation makes them feel weird. So how do you sort of engage particularly teen boys?
Yeah, teenagers definitely hard to have conversations with. I think you could try to engage the teenage boy as honestly and as possible in terms of coming from a good place. You want to really try to tell them where your concern is coming from. Really, share your concerns and try to be patient. Right. Remember, this is not a one and done conversation, and it may take multiple tries for them to actually hear you and will be willing to hear you. But I think the biggest thing is just to share with them why you want to have this conversation with them, where you're coming from, where's the anxiety of making sure that they listen to you, especially as a teenager.
Wonderful, thank you. And a similar kind of question, but specifically a child with a learning disability is even more vulnerable due to lack of understanding and communication skills. Can you recommend any resources like books to educate a child with autism?
Absolutely. So actually in the references that are in the slides, there's a link to books for all different types of ages that I recommend. So you can start having these conversations about body, about sexual abuse, about safe and unsafe touches. You can find that in the link in the PowerPoint slides.
Wonderful. Okay, and we have a share here. Both of my parents were victims of childhood sexual abuse. Growing up, they told me and my siblings about it and talked about it a lot. They made it seem as if it was almost inevitable and that it was a constant threat. 2 of my 3 siblings became victims of childhood sexual abuse. I'm certain that how my parents approached this with us caused my siblings, all of us really, to almost expect it to happen to them, and that expectation played a part in them becoming victims. Do you have any advice for how to create balance in how we talk to our kids?
First of all, I'm sorry that has been your experience. I think my gut reaction without knowing very much about your story is I hope that you have received therapeutic help. If not, that definitely it's never too late to seek out therapeutic help and the guidance of a professional to help you pass your trauma so that you could then impart some of this child sexual abuse prevention to your own kids. But I think it's very important to deal with the trauma that you have experienced.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. So that's all for our questions in the Q&A, and I see that folks are very thankful for your presentation tonight. Edgar, thank you so much. This is such a
Of course,
critical
of
and
course.
important topic, and you will be sharing the slides.
Yes, yeah.
Okay,
we'll be seeing the
great.
slides.
Great. So just for everyone who is still here, we will send the slides out to you. And again, we have recorded the presentation. Once we have everything uploaded, you'll see, you'll receive another email with that announcement, including the link. So you can go back and revisit this and sort of take your time with it. So there's so many important pieces covered. So thank you so much.
I'm glad. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of things. You're very welcome. Thank you everybody for listening and being here tonight.
Great. Thank you all for coming. Please do join us. We have one more webinar in this series in November, and we will have more lined up for the spring. So please stay tuned through our email list.